couple days ago, I spoke to a SoFi insider who worked on the technology platform who shared with me all of the details around the Galileo and Technisys layoffs. Now, nobody's really talking about this. I'm not seeing a lot of news articles that are being posted about it. I'm not seeing a lot of details around that specifically. It's pretty hush-hush, which is why I think this information is all the more crucial to share. And after talking with the insider a little bit, I agree that there are definitely areas of concern. So let's jump right into it. So first, let me start off with some housekeeping. My main priority in this video is maintaining the confidentiality of everybody who reaches out to me who is an insider working for the company. I have validated that this person actually works for the technology platform. I actually spoke with two people on the tech side. One of them is now a former employee who was just laid off last week, and I can't really find anything else online to support some of these numbers. So I'm just going off of these numbers that these insiders have shared with me in this video. Now, one thing I will say is SoFi did report great Q4 numbers last week. They're growing pretty fast on all of their major metrics. However, one of the areas that I had concerns about was the technology platform, and these layoffs play a part in that. Now, both Anthony Noto and Chris Lapointe on the earnings call last Monday, they did mention some layoffs, but it was very backhanded. In fact, I think the entire term headcount reduction or layoffs are only mentioned twice in the entire transcript of that earnings call. First, when Chris Lapointe, towards the end of his statement, mentioned that they're having a small reduction in headcount as a result of Galileo and Technisys basically operating as one unified technology platform. He mentioned that this was an opportunity to reduce costs. As one could imagine, when two companies are now merging, natural redundancies are going to occur in terms of the roles held by the individuals there. And this sounded relatively mild when he said it. Anthony Noto later in that call reiterated this point, highlighting that the headcount on the tech platform grew 2.5x in the past 3 years, and the company successfully moved onto the cloud. And on this transition from on-prem physical servers onto the cloud, I asked the insider, who did mention in great detail the reasoning and thought process behind this. They mentioned that the majority of Galileo's infrastructure was on premises, so basically physical servers stored in the actual location. And since they were already using a lot of AWS for user authentication and user management, specific role permissions, the insider also mentioned that the applications for Galileo on premises work as an open source container orchestration tool. But since they already had a lot of the integration with AWS, it made sense to fully migrate on the cloud. So we confirmed that Galileo and Technisys are using Amazon Web Services as opposed to Azure or anything else. Now, this does not confirm it for SoFi, but it's a very, very healthy pick because you want to be on the same backend infrastructure for the technology platform as well as for SoFi itself. And this was particularly interesting to me being in the tech sector myself, as this change from on-prem to the cloud will include a lot of scalability improvements on their tech infrastructure powered by these integrations. Now, this information isn't really publicly available or being advertised as to what specifically they're using for their backend infrastructure, so definitely interesting on that front. On the layoffs specifically, the insider mentioned that the total number was around 1 in every 6 people across engineering, product development, marketing, HR, and sales. In total, this accounted for about 5% of the total headcount, mostly affecting the engineering, product, and design segment of the business, and less so on the HR and sales. It only affected Galileo. It did not affect SoFi, which is also probably why there's minimal coverage on this. There doesn't seem to be many articles that are expressing details around this layoff specifically. The layoffs happened on Monday morning, very suddenly. Employees were invited to a meeting with Derek White, the CEO of Galileo, and Miguel, the CEO of Technisys, and there was an email that was soon sent out afterwards informing the company of the layoffs. Here is the email that is shared by Derek White. This is an exclusive. You can't find this anywhere else. This is courtesy of one of the insiders. We'll go through this email together. As shared on our earnings call this morning, as we look ahead to 2023 and beyond in our tech platform business segment, one area of focus is on quality of new clients, including size, durability, and time to market over quantity. This means focusing on bigger wins that leverage the combined go-to-market value prop of the tech platform, while still investing in focused new product areas to drive diversification. Our long-term strategy is already starting to pay off with greater diversification in our pipeline and margin expansion in 2023. Now, margin is one of the key areas that we're definitely underperforming for this quarter as of this earnings result. We even talked about this in depth in the last SoFi Weekly, which the highlights is going to be attached in the description. We have a whole section talking about the margins of the tech platform and how this is one of the negative numbers that were released during the earnings. In his email, Derek White continues saying that after a 3-year investment period in the tech platform, moving to the cloud, a 2.5x increase in headcount, the acquisition of Technisys, launching new products, we'll focus on increasing the value of our investment through the synergies between Technisys and Galileo, as well as joint product offerings, all to drive meaningful profit relative to revenue growth. Said another way, we are still investing and growing. We expect that more of these focused investments combined with our refined go-to-market strategy and priorities will help accelerate growth over time. So they definitely think that they can get the technology platform back on track in a re-acceleration of their numbers, which is obviously good to see, but again, there's execution risk baked into that. He continues to say, in starting to operate as one unified technology platform, we've recognized a way to reduce our costs, including a headcount reduction. It's always hard to separate from value team members, and we'll be doing what we can to make the transition as seamless for them and for the team as possible, including working with employees on internal transfer opportunities as well as providing resources for navigating the job market. Now, one of the insiders that I talked to did mention something along these lines, saying that they found it surprising how these engineers or product people that were let go weren't moved on to SoFi specifically, despite what Derek White says here. Anecdotally speaking, it didn't seem as though those were very prevalent for many roles. Derek White continues, over the next several days, we will likely have some bumpiness as we all adjust to these changes, and we appreciate your patience, understanding, and commitment to each other and our clients as we navigate this together. You'll be getting together with your leader a bit later this morning to discuss more in detail and answer any questions you may have on the impact within your specific function. Okay, so that email was very high level, explaining sort of what they want to do with Galileo. A lot of things were repeated what Anthony Noto said on the earnings call with regards to the increase in headcount, the move to cloud, and other initiatives, specifically calling out the synergies between Technisys and Galileo. All of this happened so close to the earnings call, and one of the insiders actually mentioned that they were watching myself, Tanner, Amit, and Riley on the live stream as we were going through the earnings call when they actually heard about the layoffs a little bit later on that day. Meaning that as the earnings call was going on, in Galileo, they were in progress on a headcount reduction, which is absolutely crazy to think about. I asked then about morale of the teams still remaining, and they mentioned that the layoffs were bad as many of the teammates were now gone, despite being good resources. They said that a lot of good employees were here for a long time and got laid off. But now, 1 week later, it looks as though everything is business as usual. Some of these are direct quotes from my conversation with the insider. I also asked about how they felt on Galileo overall, what their sentiment was, and they said, quote, "Yeah, I love the work I do. I think Galileo has a great work culture and a lot of talented folk on the tech side at least. I think people prefer working in Galileo rather than SoFi, at least for tech specifically." Which would make sense. If you're somebody working in specifically on the tech platform, you want to be working for Galileo as opposed to SoFi. I think the level of complexities and problems are much higher there than on SoFi specifically. Finally, I asked the insiders why they thought this happened, and they mentioned that they didn't really know. There was not a lot of details thrown around or even rumors, but they suspect that the Galileo numbers coming in weaker than expected might have had a role to play. Now, if you'll remember from the earnings video, if you haven't seen that, definitely check that out. I'll attach that in the description below. I have a full breakdown. I highlighted that Galileo's margins were really compressed. They came in at 24% in the latest quarter as opposed to 38% a year prior. So this was a big concern of mine specifically because as the growth is slowing down, Galileo only grew 31% this year. As the expenses start to rise, margin compression is not really what you want to see for this business. Of course, Anthony Noto, Chris Lapointe, and also Derek White in that email all mentioned that there are operational efficiencies to drive with the Galileo Technisys merger. They all mentioned the fact that these margins would return to high growth in 2023 and 2024, and this was a bumpy patch, let's say. But again, we'll see what happens on that front. Right now, what we can say is that the margins have really compressed, expenses have been rising, and the team is trying to cut those expenses where possible, which is what led inevitably to this layoff. In my opinion, I think it was still relatively mild, capped at around 5% of Galileo, and quite frankly, I'm surprised that we're not seeing any news about it, because without the insiders highlighting this information to me, I wouldn't have any details around the specifics on why this happened, when this happened, how this happened. I think the larger FANG companies have really set a precedent with regards to layoffs in 2023 and really emphasizing a rock solid income statement. And I think SoFi or Galileo is being prudent here with regards to these cuts. Of course, I'm grateful to the people that did come forward to share some of these details around the news of the layoffs so that I can then share them publicly. You can always reach out to me on Twitter to talk through some specifics if you want to. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe, as this video specifically is definitely an exclusive. You can't really find any of this information anywhere else. For right now, this is the Fundamentals of Investing podcast. Thank you so much for listening.